Okay, hey everyone, and welcome to this Omdia webinar, Reinventing Work, Lessons Learned from COVID-19. My name is Adam Holtby. I'm a principal analyst here at Omdia as part of the Digital Workplace team, and I am joined on today's webinar by my colleague, Tim Banting. Tim, how are you doing today? Welcome to the webinar.
All good today, Adam. Thank you for being, thank you for inviting me.
No
nice
worries.
to be here.
Excellent, good stuff. We wanted to keep the session conversational today, but we do have kind of a few slides just to guide the conversation. In terms of agenda, I just want to kind of kick off with an introduction to who we are, what our team does, and what our interest is in the future of work and all things digital workplace. I then want to kind of dive in and discuss with Tim some data that we've been able to just get back from a recent Future of Work survey that we ran here at Omdia, which looks very much at how organizations and workplaces were challenged by the disruptions brought about by the pandemic. So what their kind of short-term adaptations were, but perhaps more importantly, where it was and how it was that organizations, or how it is that organizations are strategizing and planning going forward in response to some of these disruptions. But first, a little bit about us. We are the Digital Workplace team here at Omdia, and we talk about the digital workplace not so much as a single thing or a single technology, but more an ecosystem of different capabilities that collectively and when well integrated can help organizations and support businesses in delivering against a range of different digital transformation and people-centric objectives. You can see from the slide on screen here that the technical capabilities, the product categories that make up the digital workplace are quite comprehensive. I myself look at all things workplace mobility. So those are the technologies that can help organizations improve visibility into a mobile workforce and improve how that mobile workforce is managed and secured. Unified communications and collaboration is another key area for us. And as you can imagine, and I'm sure you can attest to, Tim, there's been a lot of conversations and a lot of focus on tools that can help us collaborate in a more virtual and digital fashion over the course of the past year. If I think about my own use of Teams and how that's certainly accelerated over the course of the past 12 months, I know that's a big area for you, right, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been essential. We've desperately needed it. And it's the only tool that everyone's relied on to survive during these pandemics.
Yeah, and those platforms are kind of turning into portals of productivity, not just platforms that can help people communicate, and we'll discuss more about that as we kind of delve into today's session. Security and connectivity are two other really important areas. We don't kind of look specifically at security. We have a dedicated cybersecurity team here at Omdia, but as I'm sure you can imagine, security, it really does kind of, it works its way into all different types of enterprise technology and enterprise conversations. So we acknowledge it and discuss it as part of our digital workplace agenda and research. Customer engagement is a really important area for us because a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the conversations that we're having are really focused on the importance of better connecting the front office with the back office to not only improve customer experiences and outcomes, but also employee experiences. And that's another really big area, everything around digital experience. A lot of focus and priority from organizations over the course of the past 12 months on employee experience in particular. That is how they can better understand, measure, and positively influence it. And productivity is another kind of big area in terms of the tools, the technologies that can help employees across an entire workforce work productively. But those are the technology elements, if you would, and they're really important. But the service elements are super important to a digital workplace effort too. So these are really the capabilities that can help ensure organizations get maximum value from any type of technology or functionality. So we take an ecosystem view where we think about how all these things work together, the importance of having them integrated in delivering against, as I mentioned earlier, those core digital transformation and people-centric objectives, which are really at the heart of any, or should be at the heart of any digital workplace effort or initiative. And we've kind of defined 6 workforce characteristics that we feel are really important and should be considered by any organization whenever they're investing in any digital workplace technology or service capability. That is, make sure that employees are device agnostic so they can work without compromises to their productivity or security from any device and any location that they choose to work from. And that's a work style that's become very dominant, as you can imagine, over the course of the past 18 months. Employees need to be secured in doing that work too. And we mentioned earlier how security is such a vital function and capability across the enterprise. But people also need to be connected and informed, connected not only to each other, but also to the organization and to their role within the organization and what it is that they're doing, their duties, their tasks, contribute and help deliver against broader business objectives. And people need to feel valued and empowered. This ties into what I was mentioning earlier on around the importance of employee experience. Employees needing to kind of feel their worth within an organization and feel valued by the business, which means that conversations around things like employee well-being, especially as more work is getting done now away from the traditional office perimeter, employee well-being becomes super important. And we've seen that in the survey data that we're going to share with you today. So when we think about the future of work, what are the challenges and some of the opportunities that we've identified? From a challenge perspective, I think the world of work, as I'm sure everybody viewing this webinar today can understand, the world of work has changed in a really profound fashion, and organizations have new priorities. The digital transformation agenda has been completely revamped over the course of the past 12 months. But I think if you were to think about the changes, the major disruptions that govern all those sub-elements, it's really the speed and scale at which organizations are needing to deliver against these new initiatives that's providing the key challenge for businesses. When we talk about things like hybrid working, enabling people to work in a remote fashion, unified communications and collaboration, they're nothing especially new from a digital transformation perspective. We've been talking about these initiatives for many years now, but what is new is the speed and the scale at which organizations are needing to deliver against those type of digital initiatives. Tim, I don't know if you've got any thoughts in terms of what you've observed from the conversations that you've had in how the world of work is changing from organizations and what some of those big disruptions and challenges are.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, people were very reactive and had to react really quickly, or reactive and had to react very quickly because it was a business crisis. Organizations were fighting for survival. So they had to look at new ways to work. And I think what's happening now is during this, the pandemic has given people breathing space. So it's gone from survival to how do we thrive? How do we reinvent ourselves? And how do we reimagine work? Because the genie is out of the bottle. People are shown to be productive working from home. And that also depends very, very much on the role. But in general, people are productive working from home. And it's really sort of looking at ways in which businesses can reinvent themselves, look at changing their business priorities, and address this new workforce and measure things differently, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good point around those short-term versus long-term objectives. That kind of survive to thrive mandate, so to speak, is really interesting. And I guess one of the big disruptions for organizations, or the big changes in the way that many people work, has been the locations, the work styles that people are now adopting, right? So this data on screen now is from that 2021 Future of Work survey. It's actually the second iteration of this survey. So it's really interesting to compare this year's results to the survey that we ran last year in terms of understanding what those longer term aspirations and goals were for organizations. But this data is really focused on the work styles that employees are engaging in and are undertaking at present. And the fundamental takeaway here is that more work is set to take place away from the traditional office environment. It's just 24% of employees that are going to be permanently based in an office at a single dedicated desk going forward. The majority are going to be either working from home in a dedicated fashion, or are going to work in a more hybrid fashion whereby they'll split their time between kind of the traditional office environment and more remote locations. So a total of 58% of employees are going to be working away from the traditional office on a prolonged basis. I think that it's surprising in terms of just the sheer amount, the sheer uptake of that. I think those numbers are pretty high, right, Tim?
They are. I mean, we used to just judge things by whether or not you're a knowledge worker, which meant that you could work from home whenever, or you're in the office. And I think what we're doing now is we're looking at different sorts of work styles. And that's a real change, a profound change in the way that people are looked at now. And depending on the types of persona they have, depending on whether or not they are highly autonomous, they work on their own, or whether or not they work in a team, and the sort of interactions that they have, either they might be an individual contributor or part of a collaborative project or a big team worker. What we're realizing now is there are different sorts of work styles that fit different sorts of situations. And if you're doing low volume, high value tasks, transactional tasks, then that might be very different from spending focused time working on a specific project. So I think businesses are reassessing what employees do, which is very refreshing and very necessary.
And I think here's how the conversation needs to switch, right? In that a lot of focus at the minute still is very much on the location that employees are set to work from. So a lot of debate from business leaders around, getting employees back into the office or permanently having employees based away from the office. I think the ideal going forward and the longer term approach from businesses needs to be, let's build an organization, let's build an infrastructure that enables people to work productively and securely from whatever their location is. So location kind of doesn't become as an important topic, at least not compared to making sure that you're set up in a way whereby people can work how they want from wherever they want, right?
That's right. We know the technology works. I think by and large, a lot of it is to do with organizational culture and a different mindset when it comes to managing people. And we need to be more results orientated rather than just time sat at a desk between, 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that came out really strongly when we looked at and when we explored some of the challenges that organizations had experienced in this kind of rapid shift to remote work styles. The top two challenges, for example, were ensuring that employees had the right equipment that they needed to work remotely. I guess that's kind of understandable given that the shift was so rapid for a lot of organizations, but also ensuring that employees had the connectivity that they needed, whether that's broadband or cellular connectivity, so that they can actually connect to work resources and each other. Those were the two kind of big challenges. But then to your point on those cultural elements, supporting employee well-being was a key issue identified by organizations, in addition to ensuring that employees could stay productive. And then kind of rounding off the challenges here, or at least the top 6 challenges that we identified via the Future of Work survey, was ensuring that employees could stay in touch with one another and partners and customers, and also ensuring that they could stay in touch with colleagues and within the broader organization. So I think a really kind of quite a diverse mandate of different challenges and I guess issues that organizations are experiencing in this transition to remote work. And I think what it kind of brings to mind for me is just the importance of not just the technology, but those people and process elements too. I know that's people, process, and technology is something that's been bandied around for a long time, but I think it's never been more important to ensure that those things are all considered in equal measure, especially as we consider the type of challenges that organizations are wrestling with. And you mentioned earlier, Tim, in terms of the digital transformation agenda in general and how that's been reshuffled and the priorities, how priorities have changed there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think digital transformation is an interesting phrase that we brand about and loosely most people sort of understand what it means. But for me, there's the user experience, the digital experience, the employee experience, and the customer experience, and they all need to be in alignment. And it's also different buying centers that are responsible for those different sort of areas. So we're seeing that IT are no longer making unilateral buying decisions on technology, and that HR and facilities and other business leaders and heads of departments are instrumental in making sure that they have the right technology that works for them.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier on the whole importance of employee experience and how things like well-being are so important to that. And that was something else that we were really keen to explore via the survey work this year. So we kind of went out to organizations and asked how they felt collaboration between employees had been impacted and how productivity had been impacted. And yeah, according to the data that we got, things are quite encouraging there in terms of organizations feeling like this move to more remote work styles has improved collaboration, has improved employee productivity. And actually, quite a large share of organizations have metrics, measurement systems in place to show that improvement. And I think that's really encouraging from an employee experience perspective. We're under no illusions that, as you mentioned earlier, Tim, when it comes to employee productivity, that there's a lot of opportunity there to transform the way that that's measured and to improve the way that that's measured, move away from these kind of time tracking systems, right, and get a better sense of how people feel about the type of work that they're doing. I think those type of tools and platforms that are going to help deliver those insights are on the way, and that's encouraging. But I think it's good to see that the response from employees has been positive to this move to remote work. So it does show that in spite of the disruption, people are still able and have been able to work productively and are generally collaborating in a good way.
And at the very least, even if there's no long-term plans to support remote working, as part of a business continuity plan, it's fantastic to know that there are technology and practices that will, support the organization if something happens, because it doesn't have to be a global pandemic. It could be anything like bad traffic or public transport or strike or bad weather events. So I think what we found here is that a lot of organizations were exposed in terms of business continuity as well. So thankfully, this whole remote from home experiment or work from home experiment has proven that the technology and processes are in place to support anything like that.
Yeah, and on the technology, another thing that we wanted to explore was what the deployment plans were for organizations relating to important digital workplace technologies. So in terms of the tools, the features that organizations already have and are well adopted, things like mobility management, which can help secure and enable and improve visibility into the mobile workforce, unified communications and collaboration tools, in addition to productivity applications, well adopted at present. But when we look further forward at what it is that businesses are planning for, the type of capabilities that they feel are going to be helpful in supporting them in overcoming some of these challenges, it's things like service management platforms that organizations are viewing important. So those tools that can help them integrate not only different systems, but actually different business units at a process level. Facilities management tools, perhaps no surprise there, given the new safety measures that need to come into place and how that needs to be managed. Process and workflow automation platforms. I think this really ties into that need to transform work around these new work styles, right? Not just plastering old ways of working onto these new, more mobile-centric work styles, but thinking about how work can be made better and the type of processes that can be automated, digitized, and more refined. So I think that's where interest in those type of tools is really stemming from. And self-service and employee support capabilities. Employee support has been massive, at least in terms of a lot of the work that I've done over the course of the past year and the data that I've seen. This has really been an area where organizations have struggled and are looking to improve. And I think self-service is going to be so vital in helping teams like IT service desks deal with that just sheer capacity that they're having to kind of contest with at the minute, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and for me, the workflow automation is a very interesting area because employees are working harder. It's not necessarily that we're working smarter. So the smart investments are in automating those back-end processes that cost a lot of time. All of that stuff, all of those platforms, data and services that can be all integrated together and automated makes a lot of sense for businesses as they try to, get that extra mile out of employee and team productivity.
Yeah, and especially true and important as organizations kind of continue down this path to improve services and processes end to end, right from the front office through to the back office. I think those tools are going to be so important.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen is that's the digital workplace. I think what we're going to find is that there's going to be employers that think, what do we have to do differently in the physical workspace to attract employees back in the office? What can you do in the office that you can't do at home? Because otherwise, offices are just going to be great white elephants sat there relatively empty. And in fact, there's a number of organizations that are closing down offices or rationalizing their commercial real estate as they realize that there's significant cost savings involved there.
Yeah, that ties in nicely to another one of the questions that we asked in terms of what it was that organizations were planning over the long term to redevelop those physical office environments. And kind of the top results here were really based around safety, which I think is very understandable, given that we're still very much in the midst of the pandemic. But I think things like activity-based working, to your point, which is very much a priority for businesses, very much tie into the need to consider the physical office workplace as being so important from that broader employee experience perspective, right? Because employee experience isn't just about the way that you interact with technology, it's also about the way that you interact with your working environment and then the people within that environment. So as conversations continue around how we can improve collaboration, one thing I talk quite a lot about is that organizations, when it comes to the return to the office anyway, they need to make sure that collaboration is more than just a soundbite, so that you're not just bringing people in and assuming that that collaboration is taking place, but you're thinking about the projects, the tasks, the way that people get work done and how they can do work together, and actually building collaboration into those projects and tasks and activities. It's going to be so important.
Definitely. It's interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting because I've seen different sorts of office layouts. We've had cubes, we've had open desks, we've had hot desks. I think the combination, the mix of all different sorts of workplace environments is really useful. There's some people that get a lot of energy off other people and they like more of a coffee shop environment. There's some people that need to have almost like a library area where they can have really focused quality time that's quiet so they can focus on something that requires a lot of attention. There's other people that need to have the environment where they can bounce ideas off people and write those down in physical whiteboards or sort of bounce ideas off when they're looking at creating ideation or looking at innovative ways to solve problems. So I think organizations need to think about their physical workspace in different areas and to suit different needs.
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost at time, so I think just to kind of close out with some final thoughts, I guess just to summarize some of the points and some of the themes we've discussed. The first one here is around kind of partnerships, because the future of work it's not a destination, it's very much a journey, and organizations are going to need the support of partners that provide them not only with the best of breed technical capabilities that they need, but also with that expertise and guidance around some of those more strategic elements, understanding their organization, the type of industry that they operate in, and how it is that end user computing environments and digital workplace ecosystems need to evolve in supporting what it is that they're looking to achieve. And that's very much come out in the survey work that we've done too, in terms of when we explored the type of partner capabilities that businesses are going to value most. Yes, that best of breed technology was up there, but it was those kind of more strategic elements that were really driving interest in those partnerships going forward. And I think we were speaking earlier on, Tim, and one of the things you mentioned, which I think was really good, was around this whole kind of journey approach again, and making sure that, you mentioned it earlier, that organizations work in an agile fashion and that there are those course corrections and that businesses are regularly assessing where they are and ensuring that they're heading in the right direction. And perhaps most importantly, ensuring that these type of initiatives, digital workplace initiatives, the role of IT is important, but it needs to be a collaborative effort. It needs to involve stakeholders from across the organization to ensure that maximum value is delivered and that the needs of every employee is surfaced and kind of addressed. So bringing together different business units is key.
It does. And you need to have course corrections, little experiments, see what works, what doesn't work, what sort of tools employees like and which ones they don't. I mean, the great thing about cloud-based services is the switching costs are far less. So, if you don't like Spotify, you switch to, Apple iTunes. If you don't like Netflix, you switch to Amazon Prime. So, by looking to see what sort of services employees gravitate to means that you're going to get better value out of the services that you eventually decide are right for you. So, little experiments, course correct as you go along. Don't think, right, we're here, the destination is right over there, and we're going to go on this path without making sure that everyone is in alignment. The employees, partners, suppliers, all the business decision makers, all of the HR, facilities and IT department, all working together in the interests of the business.
I think that's really important given the sheer complexities and that can be associated with any digital workplace initiative at first, right? It is kind of taking that kind of small step approach and building value in those small ways, as opposed to thinking that's the end state, we want to get there as quickly as we possibly can. It is those baby steps, and it's that constant reassessment of the progress that you've made and how your objectives and your targets going forward maybe change as a result of what you've already achieved. That I think organizations need to really focus on.
And partners have already been on that journey with other customers, so you can learn from the experience of partners and make sure that you're getting, the best impact you are from your vendors and your partners that you look to recruit to help you on this journey.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Okay, we are at time. Unfortunately, we could talk forever about this, but I hope there's some insights in there that you've been able to find useful. And thank you for taking the time, and have a great rest of the day.
Okay, hello everyone. We hope you enjoyed that presentation on the future of work. It's a topic that's very close to our heart here at Omdia as part of the digital workplace team. And what we'd like to do now is invite two very special guests on as part of a panel Q&A, really to get some broader perspectives around some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that have maybe arose in the enterprise over the course of the past 18 months or so. So I'm delighted to welcome Bex and Ian into the discussion. Bex Rycroft is a Senior Director for Global Emerging Talent and Operations and Reskill at M3. And Ian Lowe is Head of Industry Solutions for EMEA at Okta. Bex and Ian, thank you very much again for taking the time out today. I'd love to kind of hear a short intro on who you are, what your journey has been into the role that you currently occupy today. So Bex, if you'd be so kind to kick us off.
Yeah, perfect. So working for M3, who are an emerging talent and training company, which is actually owned by John Wiley & Sons, which is one of the world's largest research publishing and education companies. Very lucky to be leading sort of our emerging talent and client operations. But I've been working in sort of the workforce sector since about 2008. And I've always been like super passionate about trying to solve like the broad range of challenges that all of our clients face, and helping to drive like new strategies around talent really into the technology sector. So really pleased to kind of have landed in a business which is all about sort of promoting graduate talent and also running sort of reskilling and upskilling programs. But ultimately, it's all about sort of trying to help clients close their skills gap, bring new talent in, and really sort of help them to innovate and move forward by having the sort of talent ready and the right skills at the right time. So COVID obviously massively affected our business, and we've definitely seen a big change sort of, I'd like to say, post-COVID. So very interested by this discussion and sort of really pleased to be here today.
Yeah, that's interesting. That whole talent acquisition and the whole digital skills side of thing is something we've seen a lot of focus and emphasis on over the course of the past 12 months, especially. That must be quite an exciting role to occupy at the minute.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely job anyway, because you're genuinely helping people sort of in their first steps of their career. And we sort of probably can just about remember what that was like, but also helping people further on in their careers, sort of finding their way into technology, because the demand and the need within digitalization and automation and all these sort of new pressures that are on businesses is, it's great to be able to sort of be part of that solution. So yeah, it's been pretty good to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Bex. And Ian.
Yeah, so I mean, I lead our industry solutions team here at Okta, and that remit is helping us build solutions that help our customers protect themselves in the digital world, both from a workforce perspective, but also in their digital experiences when they engage with customers online. So that could be like a mobile app or a website and an e-commerce site and stuff like that. And I mean, I've been in the IT and identity and access management world and technology space for over 20 years now. So don't age me too much there, but I've been in security and IT security for a very long time. So I really enjoy helping customers build strategies around workforce security and also around customer security.
Yeah, again, workforce security, something that's been massively disrupted since the pandemic. Again, I guess you've been busy these past 18 months, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the transformation, the speed of transformation that has had to happen digitally is phenomenal. There's some amazing stats around that. It's exciting.
Yeah, we commented on that in the presentation in terms of, obviously, there's all these different digital initiatives that organizations are looking to deliver against and have been challenged by. But I think, the fundamental one, the one that governs them all is, as you mentioned there, Ian, that speed and the scale of change that organizations are needing to wrestle with in delivering against digital initiatives. What in your opinion, do you think businesses need to be prioritizing over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, especially in I guess being able to to deal with this change and to, I guess, realize some of the opportunities that a lot of organizations are going to face. Bex, what's your kind of opinion there?
Yeah, so it's not an easy answer, is it? Because there's like a multitude of things that businesses should be focusing on. But obviously, the technology strategy in itself is obviously the biggest one, about making sure that they have the ability to support the demands of the remote, hybrid, and also now office-based populations. I know there's been like a global shortage of hardware, but it's also looking at all of the tools and enablers that people, may need, such as, the HR and facilities management platforms and everything. So maybe even log a desk space to come into the office, which you've never had to do before. So there's all these sort of new enabling technologies that need to be thought about. But there's other things like sort of just making sure that you're ensuring obviously the safety of staff coming back into the office, but whilst promoting like really good collaboration, because you don't want to come back in and then all be siloed and put into boxes in rooms, because otherwise it's not great coming back into the office. And then I think finally, obviously, there's the sort of the culture side of not all colleagues are going to want to come back. So how do we sort of continue to promote that contact within the organisation and other colleagues, and also with customers? So yeah, quite a few things, but I think the overarching one for me that we've seen as well is we've had a massive increase in productivity, which has been incredible. But the actual byproduct of that is that we're seeing a lot more burnout and issues with mental health and well-being, and actually supporting our colleagues in what now seems to be like an even bigger sort of demand on their roles and them as an individual. So we're trying to look at mechanisms to kind of protect the employees as well. So I think they're new challenges that companies over productivity is not something we've ever worried about before.
Bex, can I ask a brief question there? In the talent space, are you finding there's more? Is there more jobs being advertised as remote only, or remote jobs? I'm just interested in this whole hybrid discussion, whether or not people are going to go wholesale remote, wholesale office, hybrid. Are you seeing what are you seeing from in terms of trends? Are job descriptions asking for? Are people asking for flexibility?
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
there more job postings on remote? I mean, how's this sort of?
Yeah, there's been a few articles recently which has talked about the being prepared for the mass walkout, which is basically people en masse handing in their notice to roles. And the reason being is that companies that are unwilling to flex their culture and adopt the new ways of working are going to struggle more and more to get the best talent. And those organisations that get on the front foot and can offer the multitude of different ways of working are able to attract that talent. And all of a sudden, you have what would have been a role based in London where you had to pay really high living prices, obviously travel costs. Actually, you could now be in Scotland and doing that same role. So we've seen a lot of companies willing to advertise roles as pure remote or with some degree of flexibility. And even at the sort of very emerging talent and entry level, we've seen a couple of clients, especially in challenging locations where typically it would be very hard to attract young people, being willing to go pure remote on the basis of just attracting that talent. So yeah, that's a really big change. But I would say there are quite a few big names out there. I won't name them. You may have seen them in the press recently, who've put their foot down and said, especially in the banking and financial services world, where we will not change. We believe the in-office culture is best for our organisation. So we will see the war on talent, who will win in the outcome for that. But
yeah,
it's a big shift.
Of course, yeah, thank you, Beck. That's a really interesting perspective. And I guess, Ian, of course, there's this perception that the physical office gives you those secure boundaries where, none shall pass. Well, I'm dating myself now. I sound like Gandalf at the gates, but it's that perception of the physical office being secure. And I guess, there's all sorts of issues around remote. Do you think a lot of large companies feel that by keeping it all in the office, it's somehow secure? What are some of the security implications as we look at remote and hybrid and the physical office?
Yeah, well, I think there's been a huge increase, and there's a number of stats from many different analyst firms around the increase of ransomware attacks and other attacks. So there are heightened security risks, and there's got to be more focus on how you mitigate those. So when the pandemic first hit, there was a real, had to be a real knee-jerk reaction to remote work, and now we've evolved into what's called, I guess, dynamic work, which a lot of people are referring to dynamic work or hybrid work, where employees are more empowered to work where and when and how they want to. But from this comes the ultimate flexibility of where organizations have to deliver a model that we like to call trust at work, where organizations are technologically equipped and optimized to support their everyday operations, and there's a mutual trust between businesses and workers. And Bex was talking about how some organizations are maybe more traditional, like financial services, where they are really wanting all that workforce to be in the office. And then you've got other organizations which are allowing more flexibility. And Okta is a great example of that, where we've gone remote first. So we've really made a choice to, open and spread our wings to, attract a more diverse talent pool. Whereas if we had been more rigid in our approach, we might not be able to attract the best talent. And I think what more traditional organizations might see going forward is that if they aren't flexible, and we see from research like yourselves and other research that we've done actually internally in Okta, is that the workforce is demanding that flexibility. They like the flexibility to be able to choose when and where they go to work. So organizations really have to be prepared to offer that flexibility. So now more than ever, work is about people, and the digital support structures need to be in place to support the flexibility. But organizations also have to have empathy to support those people. And so there's really three pillars from a technology perspective. There's pillar one is really all about optimizing for remote enablement. And then the other pillar is around treating identity. So identity is really the central plane of control in this remote environment. We no longer have a barrier that we can control very easily. That's the office. When we have workers coming in from different IP addresses, different networks that are unknown. So we have to adopt a zero trust security approach, which is where you have to deliver the right people with the right access to the right resources. And that's continually assessed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think some really interesting points to unpack there. I like, Bex, what you mentioned around the different business functions, such as HR, such as facilities, and we'll throw IT in there too, kind of working more closely together around these broader business initiatives, those people-centric elements, especially when we think about employee well-being. And I think there's still, for me, there's so much conversation around where it is that people are working from, location, conversations that are focused on location. And to your point, Ian, I think businesses need to kind of create infrastructures that enable people to work from wherever they want to work from, right? So that employees are secure to do that, and that they can work without compromises to security or their personal productivity in that way. Surely that's the way forward, and we can move away from conversations that focus solely on location and more on what it is we need to do from an employee, a people-centric view, and from a technological view to enable people just to do their best work from wherever they work from, right?
Absolutely. And I think, and what Bex was talking about earlier is there's that real risk of burnout. So you don't want to put further burden on the employee to have to remember tons of different passwords. You want to make it as simple as possible for them to access the tools that they need to do their best work. And at the center of that is trust. And at the center of building trust is having a good view of how you handle and manage identity in order to deliver those good experiences.
Yeah, Bex, you made the point on how you've seen employee productivity improve, and we've seen the same thing in some of the surveys that we have ran over the course of the past year. But your point to that was that productivity may have improved in terms of how it's been measured now, but at what cost to kind of people? I guess what do you feel needs to happen, whether it's kind of new technologies to measure things like employee productivity in different ways, or understand what it is that people are doing to kind of achieve particular business outcomes? How do you see things going forward in terms of better understanding those more people-centric elements and being able to respond and adapt to those in a way that kind of puts people first, I guess?
Yeah, I was interested in your report actually, because when I looked at the sort of the productivity rankings and obviously the percentage of people that are saying that they've seen it improve, obviously it's clear cut that the perception is that everybody's doing more. But very few people had tools to kind of prove that they were doing more. So it comes back to it still being quite subjective. But even those companies that said that they didn't believe people had improved productivity, of that chunk, only, what was it, 1% or 2% actually had tools that proved people weren't productive. So really what that keeps coming back to is, as Ian was talking about, is like trust and culture is just at the absolute heart of knowing whether your people are productive or not. And sort of my management style, and I think something that we do within M3 and Wiley, is very clear sort of job descriptions and job expectations. We're also very clear around the parameters in a week in which we expect people to work, i.e. as in we're very flexible. We know what output should look like in terms of what success in someone's role should be. We do a lot of sort of team and individual check-ins, and then there's lots of documented sort of objectives for quarterly objectives. And even at sort of senior management and SLT level, we call them quarterly objectives and rocks, which are things, big projects that I'm measured against on top of the day job. So I think it's a cultural thing of we're all very clear our part in the puzzle and what we need to do. And then ultimately it's about that subjective, is somebody deemed to be doing well in their job, which is obviously harder to manage. So I think for me, yes, you can put lots of tools in place. I'd be interesting to know in a role like mine, which I would say is more strategic, how you would actually measure that. Whereas if you're looking at a very transactional role, if you're looking at service desk customer service, then typically you have agent scorecards, you have a lot of tools and technologies around that. So tech is integral to measuring that productivity. But there's a lot of other roles where it really does come down to trust in most businesses. And I'm not sure of the types of tools that are out there that would actually enable an employee to feel like they're trusted and autonomous in their role, and still have those kind of technology measures on top. It would be interesting to see what is out there, which Ian may know some of the answers to. But for me, it still comes back to the type of organisation that you're willing to be and manage your employees by.
It does seem quite an antiquated thing to do, is a manager, looking out on the workforce and making sure that people are working. Maybe that's the reason why people don't like remote work, because you can't, see someone tapping away at a keyboard. But we hear about these things like presenteeism, and I don't know. I'm just hoping that, we've spoken about trust from a security perspective. I just hope that there's a degree of trust between employee and employer, because that underpins pretty much everything. Relationships at work, personal life, underpins security. I'm just hoping that this pandemic has shown us that we need to sort of really work hard at our management skills and also our organizational culture.
Yeah,
and I think there's a real risk, though, if there are lots of technologies out there to be able to monitor and assess people, how people are working within the organization. So I mean, there was a couple of examples of call centers in the UK who were using video technologies to monitor the people that are working from home, if they're really sitting at the desk, and they're enforcing policies around not turning that camera off. And there's all sorts of legal implications around doing that, right? And intrusion and just lots of risk around not building trust. I mean, that at the end of the day could also take away trust from the employee, having to be micromanaged like that. But there's lots of technologies out there to enable companies to monitor and assess the activities of individuals and how they're working within the organization and across the organization networks. But there is that real risk of intrusion and micromanagement, and at the end of the day, that working against them and not building trust. And then there's kind of something else that you kind of touched on a little bit there, Bex, in your first introduction, is as we move to this more hybrid way of working, and we have to use applications to book rooms when we come into the office, or validate that we've had our vaccinations, or validate that we're not sick before we go in. There's also sorts of potential issues that grow around that, on what information should we give up as workers, and what information should the organization hold on us, and what's viable there, and what's going to work for everybody.
I think there needs to be, and you both kind of sum this up really well, I think, that there needs to be an acceptance that you can't measure everything or quantify everything when it comes to employee experience in particular, nor would you especially want to, really, especially across those more sentiment-based elements. And I think there's also it's really important that management kind of evolves, the way that people are managed evolves, to your point, Bex, in ensuring that people can work in an autonomous fashion and feel empowered to do their best work. I think we don't want to, Ian, you mentioned the call center example there, and we don't want to kind of plaster those legacy management styles and approaches onto these new ways of working, because it's just not compatible, is it?
No, totally.
And I guess we touched on the physical office environment, and a lot of the work that we've done has really kind of showed the importance of making sure that you consider that physical office environment as part of these broader employee experience conversations, in terms of ensuring that collaboration doesn't just become a soundbite when it comes to working back in the office, and that organizations need to think differently about the way that people work and together and the tasks that they do. What is it that you're seeing, Bex, I guess, from a physical office environment in the way that things are transforming, and how it is that employees may work differently in the office now compared to 18 months ago?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we've seen some clients that are enforcing, especially in the US, actually, the return to office, and are looking at blanket policies that sort of around vaccinations and everything, which is a whole place that I don't think you should be going as a company. So that we've seen some very interesting changes about getting people back in the office. A lot of them have been sort of employing this sort of capacity management, so where technology would need to support like a booking system for numbers of people in the office, and also booking different types of spaces in the office to make sure that the sort of crowd management piece is being managed. But then I think people are taking a naturally cautious approach, where we've seen things like the collaboration spaces and the co-working spaces or the social areas being sort of restricted, or even in some instances closed. And then that to me sort of has questions around, well, how does it feel as an employee then going back into the office?
Yeah.
It gives you that connotation that things aren't still safe. And actually, if there are so many measures in place to inhibit the way in which you used to kind of work freely in the office, then it's going to feel a very different environment. So it's really challenging for companies to have that blend of safety and collaboration, but also enabling people to sort of still feel like it's worth coming back into that office space. So yeah, they're just a kind of a few of the things, but obviously the classic ones around desk space and meeting room spacing and max capacities are kind of the classic ones. But my question is always in the back of my mind now is, the first question always has to be, why do we need to go back into the office? What is the overarching benefit that we couldn't achieve at home if all this amazing technology can enable us to be as successful with what we're doing? Then do we actually need to travel at all? Because there's the well-being, the cost, the environmental impact to me is a huge one. You hear how far back we've turned the clock in a couple of years by the lack of travel into major cities, and you think that's things that we really need to think outside our own sort of kind of selfishness around our own organization and what we want to do. You have to think globally of actually that's right for the environment to reduce travel as well. So for me, the physical office question is always like, well, why do we need to go back? And that's a hard one for companies to kind of come up with that answer all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the most important one, though, isn't it? It's the most simple question in terms of why, but it is, as you rightfully point out, the most important one. Ian, well, what about yourself? Have you been back to the office yet?
Yeah, so I went back for my first time a few weeks ago. So at Okta, we do have an app that we have to use to book our we have to register before we come in. We have to validate that we haven't shown any symptoms of sickness, so that we can be approved to enter the office. And then we use our phones as the replacement for the key, the card that you used to carry around your ID badge to then open the door, for example. And so one thing I think, and just to talk to Beck's point a little bit, and your question around why, I think some of our employees want to go back to the office. They may need to for certain reasons, but also just from a face-to-face and a collaboration. I mean, if you're sitting at home all the time, working remotely, looking at the camera, it can be quite lonely, I can imagine, for certain types of people. And so I think there is that need to offer the flexibility to be able to choose for the employee to be able to choose when they go in, if they go in or not. And I think it's that flexibility that's key. And when you talk about having to register before you go in, I think the organization has a duty to enable employees to feel safe to go in the first place. And we do now live in a different environment. The world has changed, and we have to accept that change, and we have to accept that things may not be exactly as they were in the past. And so I think there's that juxtaposition of how do you enable a great experience, but also provide the visibility or safety, the ability to provide that feeling of safety for the employee, and be able to manage any risks around security. And this is where it's really important, where companies have taken a knee-jerk reaction to adopt certain technologies immediately during the pandemic, to now take I think a broader look at how they manage identity, how they manage security across all of these different experiences, from physically entering the office to accessing applications remotely.
I think it ties back really well to the point that we discussed right at the beginning of this session, in that let's create environments, workplaces that enable people to work from wherever they want to work from, with no compromises to productivity or the employee experience. And that is, to the points that we've all made on the call today, that is to be cognizant of things like employee experience, those more well-being, sentiment-based elements, in addition to obviously what it is that employees need from a technology viewpoint to be able to work effectively. So let's move away from the location-based conversations and just start to enable people, right? I think that's so key going forward. Now, believe it or not, we are at time. Unfortunately, we could probably talk about this all day. I want to thank Bex and Ian for taking the time out. There's some really great insights in there, and we were really thankful that you were able to join us today. So thanks so much for that. And thanks everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed the sessions, and have a great rest of the day.